We've gone ahead and brushed on our gel coat and sprayed some on because we didn't love the surface finish, and there were some low spots that was just a bit too close to the bumper for my liking. So what we will do now is make some thickened resin with silica and milled fibers in order to get into some of these complex curves so that we can support the gel coat and give a better radius for the fiberglass to stick to, because it would not love trying to get into some of these tight corners. Your thickened resin should be made with the same type of resin that you're going to use for your fiberglass layup. In this case, we are using an resin. You want to shake it, make sure that it's fully mixed before you try to put this stuff in. We are going to catalyze it with MEKP, and then just go ahead and use our stick here to, get it all mixed up. Now we're adding our milled fibers. This is cloth fiber that are milled. It's going to provide some level of structural integrity to the thickened resin. The rule is 50% by weight. However, I just keep adding it until it gets to a more peanut butter-like consistency. Finally, we're going to add some silica. This will quickly thicken up the resin. You do definitely want to wear a respirator while you do this. As you can see, it kind of pluming out of the container. So definitely not great to breathe in. After it's thoroughly mixed to the consistency that you're looking for, you're going to pour it into a Ziploc bag, trademark, and then seal it up here, cut the edge so that it's effectively like a, icing for your cake. And then we will just simply apply it to our mold. Once it's applied to the gel coat, we're going to use an oversized popsicle stick to create radii, I don't know, radiuses along the corners here so that the fiberglass can get into these corners without causing any sort of bridging. I've brushed it on the vertical surfaces as well because it helps to keep the fiberglass from sagging. All right, you can see how we use that thickened resin to fill out all those sharp corners and add some radiuses. We also brushed it on to fill in some of the not perfectly flat spots. We are now going to allow it to gel to almost a solid state before we add the fiberglass mat, because if we don't, we will essentially have a jelly underneath the fiberglass mat as you're adding your resin that will not stay in the radius that you need it to be in, and will definitely have fiberglass voids in the fiberglass, air holes. There's just nothing you can do. It's such a pain. So make sure that you get this to a semi-firm state. So let's let that happen. I'll put the heater on just so we can speed this up a little bit, and then we'll start getting our fiberglass mat ready. Okay, as you can see, the resin is really starting to gel up and thicken up, but I want to show you what happens if you try to add the fiberglass too early. So what I'm going to do is add some fiberglass here in this area because it's not a super sharp corner. That was hard to say. And so if the resin kind of moves around, it's not a big deal because it's not going to create a massive void. Whereas if I had air pockets here, it would be horrible because then there would be no support for this super sharp corner and also a very, very important structural piece. So let's go ahead and get that fiberglass mixed up. I'll do a fiberglass veil, which might be a good option. Let's go ahead and do that. It's even thinner, so it'll really let you see what happens. If you look close, you can see that I'm moving that thickened resin around. And so this is when it's gelled up pretty good. If you can imagine, if it's not even this close, how much that might move around and why that would be problematic. If you have this gelled piece that's now shifting around right here, you may scoot it over here, you may scoot it over here, and then you're trying to get it, and it just kind of rounds out, and you now have an air bubble. It's a huge problem. Now this is fine for areas like this. This is okay. So I may actually just throw some veil on the flanges here just to get it in there, since we've already got the resin mixed up and everything. So we'll just kind of get it in a little bit here. Normally you would want to wet out the gel coat before applying something like this, but fiberglass veil is so thin that it just wets out immediately. So there's no real need to be concerned with
pre-wetting it, priming it essentially. But it conforms super easy, so it really gets in all those really crappy areas left by the gel coat. And we can just work in all this stuff and really make it resin heavy to get all the air bubbles out. So we'll just make sure that there's some good adhesion here. Something you should know when you're doing fiberglass is you need to let it saturate. That starts to break down some of the binders. So when it's not laying down flat and you have air bubbles, it's because either the temperature is too cold, your resin is not mixed properly, or you haven't let it sit long enough to start breaking down these polymers. So make sure that you soak it out. Resin heavy is much better than resin thin, and just start to work it. You don't want any voids, especially at this point. You're too close to the gel coat, and air bubbles will be completely detrimental. If you have air bubbles, you're going to have no support to the gel coat. You're going to pull it off, and it's going to immediately crack. You'll not even be able to pull apart from it. So take your time, get everything laid down, and I'll show you what I mean by this. If you look, I purposely folded this veil over, and so we have these voids here, but we're just going to work it. We're just going to add some resin. We're just going to go ahead and just work it, let it do its thing, break down all the polymers, get all the binders broken up. Go ahead and lay this stuff in. We'll lay it in heavy, let it break down the binders. Now look, see, we've got this huge fold. Give it a little bit to break down some of those binders, and we'll work it. So we let that sit for a minute, and it just lays down. And if you got some areas that are a little tough like that, that's why we have our tools, all right? That's why we have our bubble busters. Just lay it down. Just like that, it's gone.
The thickened resin has now gotten to a more firm state. So what we're going to do is take some sandpaper and knock down some of the irregular shapes that the fiberglass would have difficulty sticking to. And then we will start laying on our fiberglass veil. I don't think you can see that on the camera, but that's what it looks like. So we will knock it down, measure out some fiberglass veil, and lay that on. So let's get to sanding. Thickened epoxy is actually quite thick. If you remember, this was a very, very sharp edge. So we've got a ton of material to sand through. We're not gonna get through the gel coat and get into the fiberglass bumper. So we've got nothing to worry about. We're just gonna knock it down and call it good. The fiberglass veil is now measured, cut, and laid against the mold. So we will now mix up the isophthalic resin and then start to apply and pray for no voids.
We mixed up 16 ounces. We probably could have done more because the working time isn't terrible and it's not extremely hot today. But we're just going to be safe. We'd rather take our time and make sure that we get this all fully wetted out and ensure we get a solid seal without too many air voids. Hopefully none.
All right, we've let the first few layers of fiberglass cure, and we are going to do some sanding to get rid of just a couple of the little sticky parts that would prevent it from laying back down very well. And then additionally, we're going to grind a little bit of this inner piece out right here where it's just kind of messy, and we will add some additional thickened resin and more fiberglass there. So let's go ahead and get to sanding. So now we're sanded, we're gonna go ahead and clean this up and toss in the thickened resin. So in this case with the thickened resin, I went ahead and actually brushed it on. Afterwards, it's very important that you prime the part that you're going to lay the fiberglass on. So I'm just laying down resin before applying the fiberglass mat. When you're doing very complex shapes like this, it will absolutely look worse before it gets better. Okay, we're at the final stretch for this section of the mold. We're gonna apply 2 more 3-ounce chop strand mat layers to make sure that we have a thickness that this will support several pools and hopefully will not warp while curing. So it's very important that we note that you sand every single time between layers to make sure that you get everything blocked down pretty flat and remove any voids that you'll surely have while laying this fiberglass. We will apply one layer just as we always have, just mix up the resin and toss it on. Then the last layer, we are going to add a wax to the resin that will put a barrier to prevent oxygen from interacting with the resin, and that is going to cause the resin to fully cure. As you can see, this is still slightly tacky, and it will stay this way for a very, very long time if it does not fully cure without the wax additive. And once it's finally cured, we're gonna let it sit for a few days before attempting to demold the flanges, because we want no warpage. We wanna make sure that it's fully cured and everything that's supporting it is still there until that finally happens, because if you pull it too early, it will warp and all of this work and money is for nothing. Now that we've completed 6 layers of 3-ounce chop strand mat on top of our veil and the 2 layers of 1.5-ounce mat, we're going to do our final layer with resin just as we normally would. We are going to do a wax additive. You will add 1 ounce, 30 cc's per every quart. So this is not quite a quart. I'm not going to use the full thing, and I am just focusing on these 2 areas right now. Then we'll add wax and do the rest of it. But it's applied just the same. The only difference is the wax will separate from the resin very quickly. So you need to make sure that you mix it continually while you're applying the resin to your fiberglass. All right, it's been 24 hours and this wax additive has allowed this part of the mold to cure. So now what we're going to do is remove this backing piece here so that we can start our second part of the mold. In retrospect, we probably shouldn't have glued it to the rest of the flanges, but that's just a problem we're gonna have to deal with. From this flange and the gel coat, that's a good feeling. Now all we have to do is clean this part of the mold, go ahead and toss in clay here. Obviously we need a backing flange down here, and then remove the clay from the gel coat separator. We want the gel coat to meet up as close as possible because any little gap is going to cause an issue when we start doing resin infusion. So let's go ahead and knock that out. The side flanges were obviously very easy. We just grabbed them, ripped them off, right? That side is prepared. We'll just toss on some plastic signboard for the rest of the flange for the left and right side and get that gel coated. This is gonna be a little more difficult because we had to fold up the fiberglass in order to secure it for the upside down areas. So we're gonna cut this away a little bit and pull the plastic out, and hopefully it'll be good to go. Some of the difficulty is where this fiberglass is, I've had to fold it over and basically have secured the signboard to the piece. And it's not really in a position where I'm able to flip this bumper back. I might be able to, but because of the flange work on the sides, that would break and then I'd have to redo that, reclay it. So we're gonna do it the long way and just try to rip this stuff up.
She's thick.
That was actually relatively drama-free despite what it may have looked on the video. Now we're going to vacuum it all up, get it cleaned up, and then I will show you how we will get this second part ready for this 2-part mold that's going to be in this little area. Okay, this looks pretty good. It's quite thick. I think this is going to be a great mold. However, I'm going to wait to do this area because once I toss the flange, we're going to have two overhead areas, and that was so difficult to do right here. So what I'm going to do is do the two sides of the bumper first, and then we'll come to this once I am able to flip it over to do the bottom of this mold. That way we have an easier way to, you know, do it. So let's go ahead and work on those sides. All right, just like before, we've gone ahead and applied 5 layers of wax. We're now going to apply the PVA, which is going to be one simple light dust coat, and then we're going to apply it quite heavy and thick so that we make sure we get a good release. We are very concerned about these tight little radiuses that we've created. While required to make sure that we get a good vacuum infusion, very scary. We don't want the gel coat to fuse and then crack once we separate it. So we're gonna make sure we get it in there pretty good. All these crevices and everything, very difficult, very stressful, but let's go ahead and spray it on. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm probably going to do a few light dust coats just because I don't want it to coalesce, but I also want to make sure that I get decent coverage. Should be able to see how thick it is on there now. We'll let that dry up. Okay, now that the PVA has dried, we are going to mix up our gel coat just as we always have. We will do a brush layer on there just to make sure we get some of the difficult corners and stuff like that. Let that get a little tacky, and then we'll use the dump gun to finish it off. As I said before, the tooling gel coat is mixed up just as before. We're going to go ahead and do a full quart, 32 ounces of this, and then that's going to be 10 cc of the MEKP. That will depend on the type of tooling gel coat you use. From the company I use, that's the measurements. So we're going to go ahead and just mix it up, add the MEKP. I really enjoy using the drill to make sure that this is mixed up as effectively as possible. And then I'm going to brush it on. Now, I'm sure you've seen videos where people brush on their gel coat and they have no issues for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the brush or the type of tooling gel coat I'm using, but I'm unable to get a perfect coverage of the gel coat. So I'm using it to just thickly apply to these major crevices because I think spraying it on would cause it to be too thick. And then I'm going to actually put it into the dump gun and spray it on just to make sure that I have a more even coverage. The only downside to the dump gun is it doesn't provide a perfectly flat finish. After allowing the gel coat to cure, we went ahead and did a thickened resin in order to support the sharp radiuses that we have between the flanges and just the different areas in the bumper. And we'll of course add some surfacing veil in order to support
this
that.
mold is just like
and then we'll start adding our layers of fiberglass,
fiberglass veil,
with 2
wet
layers
it out,
of 1.5 ounce
go ahead and
chop
put
strand
on
mat,
chop strand
followed
mat
by
up to
we'll probably
5
work
to
up
6
to
layers
5
depending on
layers
how
of
thick
3
you
ounce
want
mat.
your
So you can see I'm also
mold to
doing
be.
side skirts. So let's knock out all the resin. And don't forget to get your favorite helper. It's definitely May. Easter is past.
The method of finishing out this mold is going to be just like every other piece that I've shown. You're going to apply a fiberglass veil to provide the resin some support, and then we're going to apply up to 5 to 6 layers of chop strand mat, with the final layer having a wax additive for curing, just to make sure that the mold is as strong as possible. Once that's cured, we're going to go ahead and drill through these flanges, and that'll allow us to apply hardware through them in order to secure them together, because otherwise trying to move it around and stuff, these flanges will separate and then give the potential for warping while it fully cures. Now we're going to do the back part of the bumper here. I'm just removing this plastic flange just like as we did before, removing the clay, cleaning up these fiberglass frayed pieces. I'm actually just putting packing tape on the top of it, and so that the gel coat doesn't stick to it and make it a bit more difficult when I'm trying to demold later. After doing my PVA and wax, we just spray on gel coat just as we did before, apply fiberglass, and this is the final completed bottom piece. Now, as you can see, I'm drilling again for hardware. You do this before completely demolding the part. You want to make sure that it completely fits. Once the mold is completely cured and you've let it sit for about a week or so,
It's time to clean it up. In this case, I have a ton of fiberglass just left over that never cured, right, because we didn't apply any resin. And this does take some, it takes some time. So what you're gonna do, in my case, is I just took off a cutoff wheel and gut through it as much as I could. Again, like, it took a long time. I sanded down the edges to make sure it was as soft as possible because a multi-part mold will require an envelope bag in order to do a resin infusion. That's the easiest way to do it. So you want to make sure there's no super sharp areas. Once that's finally cleaned up, we can actually start separating the mold and getting the plug out. As you can see, this top piece actually came out pretty easy, but that's just because it's such a small part, and I did heavily apply PVA. Definitely get a hold of yourself some of these wedges. They go in there, they don't damage the tooling gel coat, and they're actually really good for scraping away the clay as well. After tossing in the wedges, we can separate the bottom piece of the mold. See how cleanly that came off. And then we're going to work it to try to get this fully separated. This was actually quite a pain in the butt, and the camera died, unfortunately. But as you can see, I got the plug out and it had no damage to it. And this is the completed mold. I'm now putting it back together just so I can make sure that everything is okay. I applied some hardware back in it to fully secure it because now I'm going to clean it up, remove all the clay, and get it ready for a layup. And that'll be the next video. You will see how to do a multi-part mold layup with fiberglass. I use fiberglass cloth, and that's the best. So let's see you guys next time.